What's going on, y'all? We are back with another installment of The Preaching Collective. What up, y'all? Y'all doing good?
It's very dramatic.
Good.
Good, man.
Hey, man, it's the Preaching
good to
Collective.
be here.
This is where we get it in. You know what I'm saying? So, obviously, y'all know that we are in our sermon series, The B.L.E.S.S Rhythms, missional habits, missional practices, missional exercises. And today we're going to be talking about eat as a spiritual practice. So one of the things I was thinking about eating, obviously, I think we all love food, right? Like food is such a great thing.
No doubt.
All around the world, different cultures make different things. And there's three things I was thinking about in the Bible, thinking about food. And one is like, it looks to me, it's kind of like this symbol of like closeness and intimacy almost. Like I think about this like in Revelation chapter 3, verse 20. And it kind of seems as though like there's some closeness, there's some barriers that get broken down when you're having a meal with somebody. Like sharing meals is like that's not like like whatever. It's like, no, like you're breaking bread with somebody, which comes to me as another thing because I think about Acts chapter 2, verse 42, where the early church was praying at the apostles' feet, fellowshipping and breaking bread, which I think eating is also kind of like a community practice. Not necessarily more like individualistic. It could be a community practice. And I mean, in our culture, like people do potlucks and people do all types of, think about Thanksgiving, think about Christmas, think about holidays, think all this type of stuff. But then you get together, it's something like communal about it. Yeah. Even with black folks, when you do the barbecue, you know what I'm saying? The cookout. You know what I'm saying? Not everybody can bring stuff to the cookout though. I want to be clear.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
And real quick.
You got
Then I put no raisins.
What's in that? What's in that potato salad?
That's
So funny. That's like the test for everyone, isn't it?
As a matter of distinction, this is not the cookout. Everyone is welcome. Bring what you have.
Right.
That's right.
right.
But it is like a community practice that I think is important, right? But then also to eating also like it's something that's gonna last forever. And you think about the stuff in the Bible that is like temporarily, but won't last. But eating seems as though it does. So think about the things that will pass away, like marriage will pass away, right?
That's a big one. People don't. That's
Matthew 22 verse 30, like that's gonna pass away. Marriage is
it's pretty huge.
That's a pretty huge thing, right?
That's for another preaching collective.
Yeah, like that's a big thing. But Bible says it's going to pass away, right? Yeah. Some spiritual gifts going to pass away.
This is true.
Right? First Corinthians chapter 13, verse 8. So, but when you think about eating, it seems to suggest Revelation 19, verse 9, and Revelation 22,
it's going to be a feast. We're going to eat.
There's going to be a big feast, and it almost lasts forever. Yeah. So anyways, those are just my thoughts as I was thinking about this idea of eating, and it is a spiritual discipline in some ways or missional practice. And I don't know, I'd love to get you guys thoughts.
Or maybe there's something about what happens over a meal that will remain forever and not like the physical practice of eating. There's something about the experience of the meal that happens at a table or wherever it happens that is significant, such that,
There's I don't know if I can get you the book in time. There's a book, I think it's called Meals with Jesus. Ooh. And it's interesting, just basically tracing how often Jesus does meals with people. Yeah. It's like a ton. It's a lot. Yeah, for sure. And
you remember the number? Was it over 100?
Well, I don't know. It's just, you see that as this regular practice and the kind of people he invites to the table. Mm-hmm. So you're right. It's not just the eating. There's something about the table that is sort of inviting people in to participate with one another, kind of fellowship with one another. It's a way of humanizing each other, right? Mm-hmm. It's a way of saying you matter enough, especially in that culture. I think it's interesting to dig into the first century culture. I think a lot of it was like you eat with people, but you eat with people who are like you, right? Who either they're like you or like you position yourself in particular ways. Like I'm at this head of the table, and if you're like I'm the head, I'm the patron, and
how
you're my
close
client.
am I to you?
And you're, if you're a client who's near to me, and I'm your patron, then you can sit close to me. But like if you're sort of not, you're lower in the tier, you're going to sit far away. And it's the idea of the meal, gathering around the table, and how Christianity upends all that. Mm-hmm. The people, you don't give the higher seat of honor to the people who are you don't give the highest seat of honor to the most like capable or the most successful people, right? You notice the people who are in the margins. You include people on a table who might be outcast, a woman, right? A tax collector. You're going to invite fellowship with them, right? You even eat at the table with people who ethnically and racially, like, you're not connected to. So think of Jews and Gentiles being told to be together, to the point that Paul actually says, your practice of eating was not in line with the gospel, Peter, right? He gospelizes it, right? And that the fact that, like, Peter was only willing to eat with, moved away from eating with everyone, started just eating with his people of his own ethnic group. So
that's another preaching collective too.
Yeah. So all that sort of didn't suggest that there's something. The physical meal is one of the most immediate ways we do something physical that actually speaks to a broader spiritual reality.
I think there's some elements in that too. Just, I mean, you said a number of things just around food or around the meal, but to even think as, like, when you approach eating, there's an element of it that's fuel. So an individual component in regards to sustenance and, you know, the nutrient density of food and what it does, right? You think about the author of the Hebrews and talks about milk versus meat being for the mature, milk being for babes, right? So that kind of analogy. But you even talked about the invitation, right? Like, who's welcome and who's not, who's close and who's far. And so I wonder, you know, the idea of just playing around, not even playing around, but sort of like investigating some of those, kind of the area, the periphery of the meal, right? The meal itself, something happens there, right? There's an interaction, there's connection, there's communion, there's sharing, there's a lot that happens as the meal's going on, but even before and after, right? You even think about church, things happen before the sermon starts, or before service starts. There are things that happen after service starts, and we've even been talking about ways that you could facilitate more of that, right? If the service itself is the prepared meal, there are things that are happening before that you can do to prepare for that meal.
Right.
And there are things that you do after that meal, right? That has to do with fellowship and maybe some things that can take it further. And so I wonder, as we're investigating this and exploring some of these ideas, to think through some of those, like fuel and invitation and communion, fellowship. Obviously there's the worship also. So.
One of the things that, as you were talking about, just the amount of meals that Jesus had with certain people. And one of the things early on when I was just reading the Gospels, it struck me that Pharisees had an issue with him. Like, they always talked about and condemned him, you know, call him a glutton and a drunkard. You know, they literally label him this, but just his draw to eat with these individuals who would not, like you said earlier, would not necessarily come to the table. But it always struck me that was their critique of Jesus. Yeah. Is like, you know, like, why are you hanging out with all these people? Like, what is it about that?
Yeah, I've thought about that a lot when us as, like, followers, and to think that Jesus says, like, John, you called him you thought he had a demon because he came to you neither eating or drinking. I did both, and I'm a drunkard, a glutton, and a friend of sinners. And I go, how often do we get described that way? Because of how often we're, you know, that's our, like, hey, what are you doing? Oh, I'm going out to eat with so-and-so. You go, it's like, dog, you're a party animal or something. Yeah. Like, what are you, what do you, like, do you ever just, like, stay still? Like, you be at home? Like, it almost feels like, this isn't I don't know if it's a bad word, but it sometimes feels like when people become a follower of Jesus, life becomes domesticated. It gets quiet. It gets like, and it's like, well, I don't know if it's necessarily that way. There's people, there's movement. Like, Jesus was walking everywhere. He was seen. He was out. And again, to have the reputation of, and who knows if it was a general reputation of people are just like slandering him. Yeah. But again, like, from Zacchaeus to Jairus to Nicodemus to, you know, Simon to whoever, you can name so many different houses that he was in and out of, you know, so many cities that he was walking in between. Like, you're like, yo, you out, you really outside, you know?
Yeah, that's good. Another angle on this I was thinking of was just how the meal is opportunity to show hospitality and generosity to others.
That's good.
So I think of this particularly in Haitian culture, for example. Like food is a big deal, and in Haitian, what's interesting, especially for Haitians, I mean, Haiti is the poorest country this side of the hemisphere. Actually, I think it might be the poorest country in the world right now, and yet so much of Haitian culture is really built on sharing food with one another. Talking about a culture that does have a lot of food, and if you're in Haiti. And yet the practice of, particularly on special occasions, even if you have a little bit of rice, a little bit of soup, you're going to share it, right? You're going to, if someone comes into your home, it's almost like considered, it's like dishonorable. Like if they share food with you and you're like, no, I don't want to take your food. Like
it's like an insult.
It's almost insult. Yeah. And so, I mean, my mom used to always remind me when we visit our relatives, like, don't you say no, right? It didn't matter how much I ate at home. Like, I better receive it, like, and take it, and even in a lot of times too, they would like pack some in a Tupperware, right? And it's funny because especially we might visit a couple of different relatives, and I'm getting the same thing. We're getting brown rice, everything. Right? There's not variety here, right? Right? A couple of key staples, right, in Haitian culture, and so I'm getting like 3 or 4 different versions of brown rice, right? But all that is to say is like what's that measure of, and I think it's a picture of the gospel. Like whatever I have, I share, I give, and the meal. And it also does say, I mean, there's interesting aspects of this. It's probably not worth. This is going too far down this train. A thought, the idea of the meal in a home that's cooked. Or that at least intentionality was given towards preparing it. I use my resources to lay it down as opposed to like, hey, I just ordered McDonald's for everyone. Which again, God uses that too. I'm not sort of dismissing that as much. Yeah. But I've been sort of thinking some of our practices of how we eat meals today and what that does. How often like we're eating in a rush. I think the image of no, I'm going to create space for you. Yeah. And even I think we feel it when someone's taken extra time to invite you into their home, and it was clearly intentional, thoughtful about preparing a meal for sure, and inviting you to share it. And you don't have to, you're not paying for it, right? They're literally giving it to you. What that says, the invitation that is the experience of grace in your life when you receive that. I think all those are important.
Speaking of Haitian culture, man,
shout out
to food. Hey man, I just
want to hook you up a few times.
I want to give a big shout out to Sister Adeline.
Well, I don't know if she wants you to say this because, she doesn't want people to know.
I know because that's too late. That was too late. That was just a reminder to me. I was just like, hold on, wait, I ain't. That's not true. Actually, during the pandemic. Not the pandemic. Like soon after we had babies, your mom did bless us.
Amen.
With some home care, and that salmon was.
Oh, I know. She knows what she's doing.
Or the soup too. That soup, the Haitian soup. Is that what it's called? The Haitian soup.
Yeah. Well, it's just a name for it. I can't remember now. But
come on, speak that French.
Well, I just know it's soup.
Man, listen, that soup is
funny
great.
Story.
Yeah. Phenomenal.
Funny story about first generation. Were you born in Haiti?
No.
Okay, so first generation Americans, like children of immigrants. I grew up. This is a soup thing. I grew up eating a bunch of Nigerian food, right? And as kids, and it's funny the way accents form. Yeah. You just say what your parents say. So I would always grow up hearing, "Do you want pepper soup?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure, I'll have pepper soup." And I just thought it was pepper soup. So I grew up. And I think I see on the menu, somebody was saying something about some spicy soup. It has a lot of pepper in it. And I was like, that's just pepper soup? That's it? I thought it was like a special soup. Yeah. It was pepper soup to me. There's a pepper soup. Anyway, so it's just funny. I have a lot of stories like that. But the thing that came to mind when you were talking was intention. And thinking about that from both ends, if I'm preparing the meal, right, the intention I have about the invitation to someone who I might have said, hey, come have a meal with me. And the intention and the time and you're talking about providing space for someone, right? And all that goes into that. But then the receiver of that meal making time for that and having intention when they go there to receive that, right? So knowing you're going to someone's meal and saying, maybe I won't eat now because I'm going to eat later so that I can be present. I can enjoy, actually take part, right? And be with this person. Yeah. It'd be interesting to explore some of those things too and all the dynamics interpersonally as people do that.
That's good.
Another thing to think about here, I think when you're giving the sermon, it's going to be Communion Sunday, and just how interesting. Here's one of our most important practices as Christians is communion, and the fact that like Jesus, the way Jesus wants us to remember Him is through eating, right? Yeah. Through the physical action of eating bread and drinking from a cup, and how that is a picture of the gospel of what Christ has done for us. And so again, I'm just struck by that, the tie of that to those physical actions, but even the way we practice it, how often, it's all over 1 Corinthians 11, right? You do this together. I think like 6 or 7 times is when you come together. So participation in the body and blood of Christ, but not just individually, a participation in the body and blood of Christ together, which is why, I'm a big stickler for the significance, the importance of as much as possible. Like you can't do communion by yourself in your corner with Gatorade and a
slice of pizza,
right? Yeah. I think that's you can do it.
It's a communal thing.
It's really the full power of it is really the sense of community, and particularly when you're sort of connected to a community, the diversity of a community. I think it really even reinforces it. Like somehow God has brought us all together to participate together, and what only He could provide, right? The body and the blood that saves us and redeems us to Christ together.
That's good.
I think it's something that's really special that happens around if you're intentional about it, not just in the preparation and not just in, the receiving end, but just the intentionality in the conversations and being just listening. Obviously, all of this stuff ties together, but just the intentionality, not just, don't just throw food on the table, but really engage with people and let that be an opportunity just to present, even just to be the church.
Yeah, and this idea of a missional habit, maybe one of the sort of takeaways I'd want to sort of very much tell people is to be more thoughtful and intentional about your meals together. I'm as guilty of this as anyone. Like I often sort of think, okay, let me just eat this quickly at my desk while I continue to work. Right?
Yeah.
And one thing I've been trying to do over the last year is be more intentional, at least once or twice a week. Think of people I haven't seen in a while, maybe particular people I'm trying to reach and connect to and relate to more. And say, hey, let's grab lunch, let's get coffee. Some type of and that's, it's a pause in my day, right? It's a break in my rhythm. Arguably I could get a little more done in other ways, but the significance, every time I've done that, I've never regretted it. Especially if people I haven't seen in a while, the significance of just building those connections in that space, that's the fact that God has made us as people who have to regularly eat. I think I'm someone who sometimes sees this. I love eating, but sometimes, especially on a busy work day, I feel it's like an inconvenience for me. Like I got to eat, but like I got a lot to do. And I think God maybe says, no, I've intentionally made you this way to force you to pause. And if I take advantage of that pausing, I realize, there's opportunity to participate in life together with other people in a way that if I wasn't forced to regularly eat every day, I wouldn't necessarily think of.
Yeah, if I'd say there's a couple of things that come to mind. One, I think, is presence, like the idea of just being present during a meal. And I think that applies even when you're eating a meal by yourself, because that goes into the other one about Thanksgiving and the idea of like, even with communion, part of it is one being present in the moment, but the gratitude and thanksgiving for what is actually happening, what this experience actually means. To even when you're eating a meal by yourself and just the idea of God's provision, right? The Lord's Prayer, talking about give us today our daily bread, right? And the gratitude for just that, like I have because you've given it, right? And to have that degree of presence, whether you're by yourself or with other people, which I think is really important, that communal nature and intention when you're having a meal, but the Thanksgiving, I think is a thing that, again, we do it, right? I used to pray, God is great, God is good. Let's thank Him for our food. Right. So you teach the babies. But there's something to that to say, God, everything I have, you've given to me. Right. And so then when it comes to sharing, it's easier because it's like, I have nothing but that which has been given.
That's good.
And so taking those moments to be both present and grateful.
Yeah.
I was going to say, when you talked about the presence, it reminds me of Jesus with the woman at the well. That's the only time you see Jesus where He's like, I don't want food. I have like a food that you know nothing about. And He has this encounter with this woman at the well. And the disciples are like, well, what food did He get? And He's like, well, I'm here to do the will of my Father. Just because of that encounter, that he had with this woman. Like that gave him a fuel to be in the presence of that. So that's the only time he'll, when he's like, I don't eat this food. Yeah. That's when you see he turns down a plate. Yeah.
I love what Crystal said too. There's a tapestry between all of the rhythms, all of the blessed rhythms. In some ways, it's like you're blessing somebody by sharing a meal with them. Obviously, over the meal, there's going to be listening that's taking place. Obviously, there's eating that happens. There's also going to be speaking, right? But then there's also, it also can be seen as almost as a level of a rest.
No, on Sabbath days, they ate.
Yeah, absolutely. So in some ways, there's this big tapestry between the two that, I'm glad that we're doing a series. So it's good. Well, like, share, subscribe to your friends and let them know about what we doing up in here.
So share the video with your friends if you found something helpful. Like the video if it was valuable. Subscribe because there's more coming.
That was like a more polite way of
I was just trying to give them clarity. I was trying to, you said a lot there, and I was like, I don't know if they caught that. Let me just,
Well, yeah. Well, like we always say, love God, love people. We are out. Peace.